Jason, I know that you're a super hardcore like Quake guy. I know about your Doom 3 mods, Quake and stuff like that. Was Quake the one that kind of kicked it off for you in terms of getting into level design?
Yeah, it was Quake 1. And I like to tell a funny story about this because my buddy reached out to me and was like, "Hey, you can make levels for Quake 1, but you have to I found in some magazine you can order Worldcraft for $40." And I was like, "Okay, let's split it. Let's go in halvesies on this." So we each paid $20 for it, and we got a disc of Worldcraft. And then later, much later, I find out that I think Warcraft was just always free, and that somehow that magazine just made $40 off of us.
Really? It was like a big magazine I was doing this.
Yeah.
Wow,
yeah, some regular magazine at the time. This was in 96, I think. So
I suppose that must have been it, because I got into level editing with like Doom and Quake. And I do remember for Quake, my brother bought a Quake editor called QED. And we bought that at a shop as well. So it must have been a thing, like people cashing in on, Quake editors. So you're like, I think you've gone through the whole Quake 2, Quake 3. You kind of made maps for all of these, right? And
I stayed pretty much in the Quake engine. I reached out into Unreal a little bit around Unreal Tournament 2K whatever, 2K3, I think it was, and tried some of that. But I mean, since '96, I've been in a Quake-based engine. Constantly.
Because let me think, Titanfall and Apex even are still
they're in source,
Quake-based, and you use Radiant as the editor. I think cause I've listened to your interview with Ryan Smith for design.
Right. Yeah. It's a Radiant that we it's an open source Radiant that we found at the start of Respawn called Dark Radiant, I believe is what it started as.
The darkest
Radiant. Open source. And so we just, me and a couple other level designers were like, look, we know how to work in these tools. We will be faster if we just use this. And, we just wanted to start working. So
Right. It kind of never occurred to me that you could just switch editors like that. That with, I know it's all Source and Quake and there's a lineage there.
Well, you can do anything with enough engineers.
Right. Yeah. So how about you, Mackey? How did you get kind of started out in level design? Like, when did you realize that you could make levels, for example?
Well, I remember that day, although I don't remember the date exactly, but it was early in the Doom era when some of these initial WAD compilers were first released. And I remember the first time I was able to move a wall for E1M1 of Doom and load the game up and see that the wall was in a different place. And there was some flickering garbage next to it, but oh my gosh, the wall was in a different place. Yeah. And I had to go to karate that day. And the whole time I'm like, man, I got to get home. I move another wall. It's so amazing. And I had a friend of mine as well. We were in high school at the time, and we were just making as many Doom levels, exploring that space. And then eventually, this was pre-internet, we found a local BBS, and then we found very early internet IRC channels, and that opened the doors to the larger Doom community and also to finding out how good players were at Doom, that they used the mouse instead of the gamepad or the keyboard. So I started a long period of time where I would make long distance calls to the best Doom players and they'd just destroy me, and I was getting better and better, and I was making all these maps. I'd invite them onto my map. I'd know the map. I'd have an advantage of about 30 seconds, and then they'd destroy me the rest of that match. So, yeah, it was a very creative, exciting period.
Yeah. I like I say, I got into levels of Doom, and there was two things that really struck me. I remember one time, it was when I realized that you could download other people, like the internet was a new thing, and you could download other people's maps. And I feel like I've been kind of permanently inspired by one map that I can't remember the name of, but somebody just made one super narrow, super long, like a mile long corridor, and just filled it with imps. And it was like bullet hell, basically, in Doom. And it just blew me away, like, you can make something completely different. And you can just keep clicking and adding imps, and you've completely changed the level. And yeah, and I was like really young at this time. I was like 11 or 12, I think, at this point. And I was just like blown away by this. And there was other stuff like, what was that? Not dehacked. There was something you could, a program you could use to actually change the kind of, you did that kind of thing as well.
I started making what was called total conversions. I was helping out on this old Epic game with robots called One Must Fall. So I had access to all the 3DS source. So I started rendering them and putting them in Doom, and then using DHackEd to change the gameplay to match more what the models looked like, and just releasing my own total conversions. So I would say I started with the levels, and the levels were the medium that was the most comfortable to edit back then. So I was just making tons of levels, but then I also was looking for what can I do beyond the levels? And it wasn't really until Quake with Quake C that world really opened up.
Yeah, it exploded. Yeah, totally.
You got contracted to do stuff for id, right? For Quake expansion packs.
Yeah, I was it was on IRC one day that friend of mine and I proposed the idea of having a Doom convention, but by the time summer rolled around, Quake was already in the ether, so we called it QuakeCon instead. And there was a whole kind of a Charlie and the Chocolate Factory experience of that period of my life where I'd see Dave Taylor on IRC, and he said, "Who wants to come test Quake?" And my friend and I, we do. And we got on a plane. We flew out there in January of '96, visited id Software. We show up in Dallas, and we meet all the locals that we knew from IRC, and we're doing like a local Doom tournament. We're driving around Dallas, and in your head, you're imagining, oh, this is like what it would be like to live in Dallas and work for the big guys. And then we drive to the Cube. It used to be in this black Cube office building. We arrive at the Cube. We get out. We see John Romero's Humvee parked sideways across 2 handicap spots. And we get him down there. We're taking pictures on these pre-digital cameras because I was always the photographer. Jason knows this, but these pre-digital cameras that we're taking pictures with, and just getting in there and picking their brain and doing whatever we could to get on the inside track to being like real boys in the industry.
Right.
And to Jason's point about the expansion packs, I had these relationships with these guys in Texas that were making. They're more like level dumps for Silly Soft. You probably remember maybe D-Zone. So they would take a bunch of levels off the internet and dump them on a disk and sell it. But for us, we did something called Q-Zone, where we took all the levels we had made and dumped them on a disk and my conversions and stuff and sold them. So my first like PC Gamer review was like a 25 or something, because they were trying to hold that to like a real standard. And it was just like me with my little microphone and a bunch of little, Quake mods I was making. But through those relationships, I was able to get a level into the first Quake expansion pack, Scourge of Armagon. It was made by Ritual. They were called something else at the time. But that was my first experience outside of that, the One Must Fall strategy guide thing, shipping a really professional grade level. And the thing that surprised me about that experience was I made this level that I thought was good. I gave it to them, and then they came back with like 100 pictures of things to fix. And I'm like, I didn't know a level could have 100 things to fix. And that's actually like nothing compared to, what ultimately happened. And then even after I fixed those things, they went through and tore out and repaired and redid like a third of the level. So it was an eye-opening experience into the level of quality and expectation at a professional level.
So was this kind of before you were a professional, but like you were potentially making money from this? Yeah,
right. I had a whole period of time through the strategy guide I wrote for One Must Fall, through contract work as much as I could get. It was like my parallel education. I was in the Savannah College of Art and Design after a year at UVA, just doing, hey, if games don't work out, maybe I'll be an artist or an animator or something. But while I was there, I wasn't going to any parties or doing anything fun. I was just working on my stuff, just making total conversions, making connections, selling levels. Probably my stupidest but favorite selling a level story is when we did one more of those zone discs. We were going to do it for Heretic. It was going to be for Heretic, and we made all these. And the Silly Soft guy said, "We'll give you $150 per level." So we're like, "Oh, we got to make as many levels as we can." Somewhere in 95, try to do a level a week. Like, this is how we pay our bills. We make levels for Heretic for when we do H-Zone. And then at the last minute, Hexen came out. The Silly Soft guys are like, "Fuck, well, this or language controlled. This has to be for Hexen instead." So they took our levels and they dumped it into a converter, and they ran it through a converter and pumped the Hexen levels out on the other side. So when we get the disc, I did my 11 levels. I got my 1650. But when I got the disc and I put it in and we go to play it, the textures are weird, and instead of a gun on the ground or a staff, it's a boots of speed. It was not a 1-to-1 experience.
They didn't test it to make sure it was right.
We never got to play it. They just converted it and shipped it in the most appropriate format that occurred to them at the time. So it was the early days of just doing anything I could to be really making it in the industry, and maybe not my best work, but it was formative and it was a lot of learning through.
Right, and you did Heretic and Hexen. Oh man, I forgot about those. I remember Hexen was like a massive game because in my mind as a kid at least, it was the first game that did the whole hub level thing and the idea that you could go back to another level. And to me that was like, I suppose it was like the dawn of open world to me as a kid. I was like, oh my god, that's amazing. Like the idea that you can go backwards in a game. Like but so what were you doing, Jason, around this time when, like, how seriously, I suppose, did you take was your Quake stuff back then like just for fun? Or was it
it was very different than Mackey's perspective because I didn't.
Wasn't there pizza involved at some point?
Pizza? I mean, there's probably lots of pizza involved.
I thought you were delivering pizza at one point, but anyway, sorry.
No, I was a server. I was waiting tables that was my 7-year career at this point. I'm like 24, kind of a dropout of college and just didn't really have much of a plan. But I would go home and I would make levels for fun and just make levels and play lots of games. And it never occurred to me that this was a job that somebody did. It was just something that I could buy and do for fun. And then one day I was reading a game. What was it called? A game developer magazine. Is that what they were called? And saw an advertisement for Activision Studios. And it was like Treyarch and Infinity Ward and Raven. There's like one big, contact Activision to work at Activision. And I was like, whoa, I wonder if that's possible. And I had all these levels, just tons of levels that I had made, and I was uploading them to all these different mod sites, and people were, getting thousands of downloads. I was like, I don't know, maybe this could work, right? And, it was like a realization of like, holy crap, I think I could do this for a job. And so I just like came home from a bad shift one day and I was like, screw this. I'm not doing that anymore. I'm setting my mind 100% to do this. And it took about 6 months and then I was moving to California. So, I mean, that was.
Which studio was this?
It was Gray Matter, which, they had just shipped Call of Duty United Offensive expansion pack.
Right, okay.
And they worked on Return to Castle Wolfenstein and then some games before that. So they were like, they made some good games and they were working on the next Call of Duty, or at least that's what I was told. They had me do a Call of Duty take-home test. And man, I don't think it's like this now because, the source tools are easy to use. Unreal's super easy to like get on your computer. And if you have any issues, it doesn't run, whatever, you can figure it out. There's a lot of resources out there. At the time, getting the COD tools to run on my computer with no documentation and nothing, they sent it to me. It crashed as soon as I tried to run it. And I was like, well, I'm not going to bother them about it. So I'm going to I'm going to try and find online. It was a pain in the butt. And the test that I gave them was garbage. There's no way that I would be hired anywhere now. Anywhere.
Right.
There was no gameplay involved. It was just 2 buildings and a road, and you could go into the buildings and shoot at the other building. And that's all it was.
Right. Like struggling with the tools, you mean? Like was it just like, was there a time limit on this test?
I think it was a really stressful week.
Right.
And I was just learning, the first time you load up to mod a game, it's like, you got to learn how that game plays. Like, what are the controls like? What is the movement model like? What are the guns like? What is the experience I'm supposed to make a good version of? I don't know this game well enough to just do it. Yeah, so I had to like play the game, research the game, try a bunch of crap, and then learn the tools, learn the assets. Where are the textures? What textures do I want to use? What do I even want to make? Like all these decisions.
Wow, that sounds hard.
That took 75% of the time. And then the last 25% was like, I'm running out of time, make some buildings.
I can relate. Like, should I say, like, I did a test for a certain AAA company where foolishly I decided to use software that I wasn't familiar with to kind of block something out. Complete disaster. Like there was a time limit to submit what I'd worked on so that we could talk about it. And by the end of the time limit, I was so unhappy with what I made. I just said, I don't think this is worth talking about. I've kind of screwed this up. And it was just like massive lesson learned. Like, never use tools if you can, like, that you're not familiar with on a time limit. It's just, yeah. So that sounds really hard. But how did it go? Did that?
I mean,
somehow is a happy ending that this worked out.
Yeah, it is. I mean, somehow it got me an interview. They flew me down to California. I was in Georgia at the time, and I met with the team, and I think they were just going through a surge. They just needed a bunch of fresh talent making levels, and a bunch of the people that I still consider really good friends and my peers. Some of them still at Respawn. Some of them I worked, left Respawn in the last few years. I worked with for a decade. We all started at like the same day at Treyarch.
All right.
And none of us had made games before. And so I think they just took a chance at the time. Treyarch took a lot of chances on modders, All
right. Yeah, it sounds like that was a bit of a thing back in the day. I remember reading when I was a kid, playing Quake, and then reading in UK PC Gamer about Daikatana and the way they were just hiring level designers off the internet. And to me, that was like mind-blowing. Like, that's how the games industry works.
Yeah.
And it kind of back then it was a bit more Wild West. And yeah.
Hey, I tried to get in there,
Right. Yeah.
I had this feeling when Daikatana, when Ion Storm was starting, like, I missed the boat. Like, now these games are getting bigger. The teams are huge. I couldn't even get, and I tried. I think I tried to get in. They already had the designers they wanted, so I think I tried to get in as a modeler, and they didn't like my Q-Zone models. So,
yeah. But so what was your first? Which studio did you join first? What was your first job?
Well, I'd had those. I was doing a remote before it was cool, but I had those remote work where we made a bunch of things. We even made one that was a little more legit called Hell to Pay. And a funny thing that happened was that company, which was actually in Dallas, that we were all working remotely for to make these things that Silly Soft would release, was in competition to get the expansion pack to Ritual's first real stand-up game, which was Sin. And they were they were trying to get the expansion pack. And another company in Tulsa, Oklahoma was also in competition for that project. And that company was 2015. So it came down to the wire, and 2015 ended up getting the project. They got to do the expansion, which I think was Wages of Sin. And by not getting that, it actually killed the company that I had been working with. And then lo and behold, when I'm trying to get into the industry, finish school, I see that 2015 is making Medal of Honor Allied Escape. And I see the picture on evilavatar.com of a German soldier officer, leaning over a balcony. And I'm like, this doesn't look like a first person shooter. What is the interesting gameplay and setting where you actually have time to breathe and an officer can be taking a moment? They had all these shots with interesting moments of World War II. And, I had seen Saving Private Ryan, so it's super interesting. Time period. And so, we were all at the time very influenced by Half-Life. So this was going into 2001. And so I applied and I go down there, and they wanted to make a scripted game. It's sort of those Half-Life influences, and they didn't actually have anybody with much script experience. So I was super attracted to them, and they made an offer right there. But they still, to get the interview in person, I did have to do something for them. Where's the pound of flesh, right? So I had to go build something, even though I had a bunch of stuff. And I'm told that the side-scrolling total conversion I did, where you play Quake side-scroller, was the thing that really got the attention of one of the guys. Huh. So what I did, I was living in Williamsburg at the time, and I went around with my camera. I took pictures of all this stuff and made surface art. I brought it into Quake 3, and it's the dumbest thing, but I built my house.
Oh yeah,
actual we've all been there, but I needed to do something specific for them. So I built my house. the little air conditioner unit, picture. Okay, it looks like an air conditioner if you squint. And they're like, cool, we can run around your house. Okay. And you can script, oh, you're going to work here, buddy. Come to Tulsa. The cost of living's really low, and so is the salaries. So
yeah, the Tulsa game dev, that never really took off.
It had that chance. I mean, talk about your crazy moment of talent. I started a week after Jason West, Steve Fukuda, Robert Field, Zia Driki, all these people, Earl, Brad, all in one place to make games in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And then we all left and started Infinity Ward. So.
Right, okay.
But yeah, the level was enough.
Right. And that was on a Medal of Honor game, did you say?
Yeah, it turned out after I got there, and I said, okay, now let's see, this cool game you guys have been making. And I found out all those shots that had won me over were posed 3D models that weren't even animated with pictures taken of them.
Right.
And it's like, okay, E3's coming up. We need you to make this work. Even if it means you're going to script every footstep the guy takes, because we don't have pathfinding yet. We need to make a great demo for E3. So without pathfinding working properly, we were able to get a demo that the Medal of Honor had quite a fantastic E3 reception where you had to go into the Higgins boat that was set up at E3 and kind of go inside like you're boarding the boat to go, breach the shores in France and see this big D-Day sequence. But it was all very scripted and we got to get something together quick to juice this game up.
An overly scripted, unrepresentative thing shown at E3, that's probably the first time that's ever happened.